So welcome to this last lecture in this series. Here we will deal with the data management as well as also we will see the various regulatory requirement with respect to a medical laboratory or clinical laboratory in India. In regulatory requirement, we will also see what are the various registrations are required. We will also discuss that in a short. So basically when if you want to initiate or when you want to have your own startup laboratory, what are the different mandatory registrations and certifications you will require. So we have included this in this last uh, session of this program so that it will give you a brief idea like we have seen like what are the guidelines for standard good clinical laboratory practices and everything. All that has already been discussed. But like from where to start, what are the certification registrations are required that we have included here. So at the end, we will discuss that tomorrow. So to start with today's session, first of all is data management. In data management, there are certain things which we will see as a part of good clinical laboratory practices. So first is the data integrity. So data integrity is basically defined as a paper-based or electronic data that is complete, accurate, consistent, and reliable through its life cycle from the time of data creation, archival, scanning, retention up to destruction. So data can be in any form, not necessary it should be only in a computerized system or only in the form of electronic data, because many a times we have seen not for all laboratories it is possible to have data in the form of electronic media or your information in a electronic or computerized format. So many a times we do create certain registers, handwritten forms, formats, and documents we create manually. We write it down with a paper and pen. So basically, here data management we are going to consider both the aspect, not only the electronic format but also the paper format also. So to define the data integrity is basically whatever information, data is information which is complete, accurate, consistent, and reliable. So your data must be reliable. It should be complete. There should not be any gaps. As far as possible, it should be accurate and consistent. There should be some consistency in the data. And it should go through this life cycle. There is a life cycle for data. Creation of the data, archival means storing of the data, scanning means reviewing of those data, and retention up to the destruction. So it is not like simply you have created a data and after some days you have just destructed or you have just destroyed it. You need to retain it for specific time period. Certain data or certain information is critical. You need to retain it for a longer duration. You need to keep it for maybe for years. Some data related to the histopathological examinations, data related to your medical legal requirement, data related to your genetic testing. All those data for pediatric population needs to be retained for a very long duration. So there should be appropriate retention and your data must be available in this complete retention period. So if you are mentioning that something you are going to keep it for 10 years or 15 years, it should be available for those 15 years. It should be retrievable. It is not like that simply you have said 15 years, but if I want to see it after 2 or 3 years, I am not going to find out. So it should be retrievable, and that is why there should be an appropriate storage of this data. Few countries have defined it as a acronym with respect to data integrity. So what is this acronym and what does it stand for? A for attributable, there should be a specific base. It should be attributable to any specific background information. Your data must be having appropriate traceability. It should not have just come from the sky, or the data should not just can be dropped from your somewhere. There should be appropriate background for those data. It should be attributable, legible. You should be able to read and review those information. Not only you have to keep the information. We have seen many times some data are scanned. You scan. There are certain paper copies and paper data which are scanned, but then the scanning is not proper.
So you are not able to read it. You are not able to find out what is the information actually is mentioned there. So it should be legible. Even if it is a electronic data, the fonts, the type should be appropriate so that it can be read by a normal person with a normal eyesight. Contemporaneous means it should be created simultaneously. Whenever you are creating any activity, whenever you are performing any activity, the data must be created simultaneously or in concurrent or along with the activity. So if you are doing any activity in your laboratory, the data related or the information related or the records related to that activity should be then and there it should be recorded. It is not like that you will still sit at the end of the day and you will complete all your remaining registers, or whenever you are facing some external assessment at the end of the year or at the end of 2 years, you are sitting for last 1 week and you are completing all your pending records. No, it should be contemporaneous so that it is created simultaneously. It should be original. There should not be any falsification, there should not be any piracy, there should not be any fake data. It should be original. And most important thing, it should be accurate. There should not be any discrepancies. There should not be any inaccurate data. Whatever exactly or whatever actual your observations are there, it should be recorded as it is. There should not be any falsification or there should not be any type of fake data. So these are the specific attributes of the data integrity which should be mentioned. Data integrity can be monitored by keeping a check on following areas. For example, source data verification. Source data verification means the data from which we have actually created your information. So basically it is a raw data from which you have generated or from which you have come to some conclusion. So there should be appropriate source data. It should be verified. There must be appropriate data access and data control. So you should have appropriate control on this data. Not everybody should be able to access those data. You should have access control. Nobody should have unauthorized access. Nobody should have any unauthorized rights to modify, delete, or make any changes in that data. You should train personnel who are involved in data collection. So there are personnel who will be doing this data collection job. So they should be trained how to capture the data, how to capture the accurate data, and how to maintain or retain this type of data. Data monitoring can be of on-site, centralized, and risk-based monitoring. It should be associated with quality assurance with respect to the data monitoring. So this is the quality assurance related to the data monitoring. Confidentiality of the data should be maintained. So your data should be confidential. You should not disclose the data to anybody who is not relevant or for whom anybody the data is not relevant specifically. The ability to tamper with the data such as changing, deleting or falsifying data should be restricted by clearly demarcating roles. So you should not give rights or authorizations for everybody to change or to amend the data. It should be restricted to only some selected authorized personnel. So you should clearly demarcate the authorities for the personnel who can edit or who can amend the data. You should give them appropriate rights with respect to the changing and deleting the data. This also prevents potential conflict of interest that may hamper data integrity. So accessing the data or controlling the data access will also give you an appropriate view with respect to the maintaining the conflict of interest. If there are any conflict of interest, the data can be protected from those personnel so that they will not be involved in having access to any type of data. Data integrity audits. The next part here in the data management is data integrity audit. So specific audit look out for any data, metadata that previously went unnoticed, such as deleted or unchecked, misused, orphaned, or reprocessed data. So you should check. Always the data should be checked two times or maybe many multiple times to check if there is any deletion, if some data has been missed, some data if it is misused, or orphan data. Orphan data means, as I have mentioned, it should not just come from somewhere, nowhere. There should be a specific source data. The data should not be reprocessed or filtered data or selective capturing of the data. It should be avoided. For that purpose, you should have appropriate data integrity audits. Entire data life cycle should be subjected to scrutiny by all the departments involved in the trials, such as but not limited to data management, safety, quality risk management, statisticians for compliance issues in areas of data management and data access control. So, as these guidelines are also applicable for the research laboratories, so here it is mentioned that wherever the trials are conducted, the data related to those trials must be limited to the data management, safety, quality risk management, and statisticians for compliance. So there should be appropriate data integrity audits even for your trials and research laboratories. Then coming to the data security, it can be divided into four components. First of all is the hardware security. Operating systems should be up to date operating systems. So whatever operating systems we are using. So now previously there were certain limited operating systems are there, but now there are multiple operating systems are there. So you must ensure the hardware security for your operating systems. Your data must be protected by malware protection. So we have seen there are a lot of cyber attacks are there, phishings are there. So data must be protected from malware. All the laboratory computers should have robust antivirus software installed and configured for automated regular virus definition updates and file scanning. Now many places we have seen that computer system will have some antivirus and it has never been updated for any new definitions, or there are no regular updates for the antivirus definition. So you should find out, or you should have antivirus protection which is regularly updated. There is regular updation in the definitions of virus. New type of virus or their definitions, their protections must be updated in your systems. The fourth component in data management is laboratory instrument or interface instrument. Laboratory instruments are exposed to similar security issues as laboratory computers. So laboratory computers, now we have seen all these equipments are driven by a specific software. These are called as embedded softwares. These are called as embedded software. So these are the software which are specifically meant to drive or to operate those equipment. So similar type of equipment are associated also with your laboratory instruments. So whatever risks are associated with your laboratory computers, same type of risks are also associated with your laboratory instruments. The instruments operating systems, hardware protection, malware protection must be addressed. So similar to the laboratory computers, your your equipment systems, their operating systems, their hardware also must be protected. It must be protected from malware, data theft, breach of data, or appropriate type of firewalls. And the next component is data management is mobile devices. There should be steps in place to develop secure authentication for mobile devices along with ability to track and secure mobile devices remotely by locking or wiping out of information. So many times now there are practice of using mobile devices for most of the purposes in laboratory also. There are tablets which are used. There are handheld devices, there are smartphones are there, there are laptops are there. These are all mobile devices in which data is also integrated, such type of devices, and these devices are portable. So chances of losing those devices it's much higher than your computers which are available in laboratory. So you should have ability, those mobile devices should have ability to be controlled by any remote locations, where in case of any loss or in case of any theft, you should be able to lock those devices, you should be able to wipe out the data from those mobile devices. Coming to the network security, on premises hosting data security, these hosting options allow strong data security with data protected by the company firewall, although using cloud-based services. So hosting data means server where the data is actually hosted. So there can be two type of servers. One is the on-site server, one can be off-site servers, and you may have cloud-based servers. So wherever the data is maintained or hosted, there also you should have appropriate requirements to be followed. There should be appropriate firewalls. There should be appropriate protection from data breach. There should be appropriate protection from any type of failures. You should have appropriate downtime plans even for this type of data which are maintained offsite. External and cloud-based hosting data security. There are availability of licenses, wholly external cloud-based software as a service offering. So you will have fully cloud-based softwares will be available, which will have licenses and which will also be following the requirement as per the regulatory policy. Coming to data security, for internet transmission of patient data, the minimum security requirements by utility, secure socket layer, that is SSL protocols which encrypt the data using a private key to protect patient confidentiality. So patient data transmission via internet or intranet should be secured with the help of SSL protocols. SSL protocols are basically a secure transmission of data or encryption of the data where the data will be accessible only to those persons to whom it is directed or for whom it is required to be consumed. Apart from that, it will be locked by a private key which will be available only with the master administrator. Then coming to the application security, it must be password protected. All applications should have password enabled as the main method for user authentication. Organizations should formulate procedures for creating, changing, and safeguarding passwords that allow access to systems with critical data. So whatever computerized data is maintained in your equipments or in your systems, it should be protected with the appropriate passwords. And creating, changing, and safeguarding this password will be helping you to allow or access this data in a only authorized personnel. So there should be appropriate policy in your institute for authorizations of this data access and safeguarding of this data. There should be appropriate password creation with respect to the levels of securities your institute is planning for the data management. Two-factor authentication. Nowadays, you might have seen this two-factor authentication whenever you log in your new system or in some new computer or in the with your new smartphone. You get a second authentication on your previous device or old device which is already linked. So apart from putting your password, you get a second authentication or a OTP which is generated, which is sent to your older devices. So there should be a two-factor authentication. Applications utilized by laboratories should ideally have two-factor authentications capabilities. Role-based access control. So there are various roles, responsibilities in your laboratory. There are various description, job capabilities. So based on your role in your laboratory, the access of data should be given to you. So somebody is sitting at the reception counter. So they should be given access only to enter the data of the new patient or to view the data of the patient. Apart from that, somebody who is processing the samples and recording the result, they should be given access to enter the results. They should be given access to enter the results which are generated. Somebody who is authorized to review those results, they should be given access to view those results and to authorize those results. Apart from that, access will be given to somebody who is at the master administrator level to modify, to change the data or to delete this data. So based on your role, the access of data should be given to each individual working in the laboratory. Apart from that, personal security, employee training, compliance, security awareness training should be provided for all employees at the time of their hire, and their initial training should be reinforced periodically with follow-up security reminders. So security is related to the data management and other security of personnel with respect to the individual staff. This training should be given at the time of hiring. So that means at the time of induction, and thereafter subsequent training should be given periodically. Then there are peripheral devices and IT hardware, namely computer terminals, should be viewed as a potential site for rough use employees to extract data via peripheral storage devices. So basically, Data can be extracted from any source. So these are called as basically the peripheral devices. So data can be extracted from your laboratory computer, from any system which is located at third party location, any servers which are located offsite, just using certain pen drives or certain floppy drives or certain CD drives, the data can be extracted and can be transferred. So protection should be made that these devices should not have any unauthorized access to any type of USB drives or any type of hard drives which can access or extract the data from your main system, which can or which will lead to any type of data breach. Role of laboratory data management starts with the creation of the new UID and patient samples and includes recording the details of the patient's findings or analysis, reporting of the results, and archiving the data for future reference, ensuring confidentiality at all stages such as required or applicable. So basically the data recording starts from once the patient comes to your laboratory or once the patient comes to the OPD of your hospital. The recording of the data starts, the patient identity gets created, a UID is allocated. Apart from that, various other details, personal details get recorded, clinical histories get recorded, other radiological findings, laboratory findings get recorded, and finally reports and results are also get recorded in this under that specific UID. So you should must ensure appropriate confidentiality at all the stages, not only at the beginning or not only at the end of this process or life cycle of the data. There should be appropriate confidentiality at all the stages of the data creation. Laboratory data management is a highly specialized field. A laboratory may choose to manage data manually in the form of reports or through online systems. So this, as I have mentioned already, data can be mentioned in any format or in any way, such as your computers, or it can be given via printed documents, paper copies, as which is appropriate for the specific laboratories. In both the cases, the security and the storage of data should be mentioned as per the laboratory's policy. In any case, laboratory should have documented procedure to ensure that the confidentiality of the patient information is maintained all the times. So you must have appropriate procedure how we are going to secure, how we are going to maintain the confidentiality of the data related to the patient information. Disaster recovery plan. So you must have appropriate recovery plan. Many a times it happens in your laboratory. Some data gets wiped out, some hardware get corrupted, some hard disk get corrupted, and all data will be vanish. So laboratory must have appropriate functional plans. There should be a periodic backup of those data. You must ensure continuity of your services in case of any type of natural disaster, floods, earthquakes, if there are fires. So there should be an appropriate disaster recovery plan. Your data must be stored at least more at one more place where which is different from your geographical location, so that floods or any type of earthquake should not affect the data and must be recoverable in any type of natural calamities also. All the released laboratory results should be stored as per the national and regulatory requirement. So report must be stored and archived as per your guidelines and national requirement which is given by the your state. The records can be maintained as a physical copies or electronic. As I have mentioned, you can just take the printouts, photocopies, and you can keep the records. You can also handwrite the records, or you can keep it in your systems in the form of electronic document. In hospital attached laboratory, hospital information system manages all the activities of a hospital, including laboratory, which is integrated information system. So basically, hospital information system will have an additional module which takes care of your laboratory management, data management also, where there is an appropriate integration between your laboratory information system as well as the hospital information system. Independent laboratories are managed by LIS or laboratory information system, which are designed to process and report data related to the individual patient. So there are various LIS or laboratory information systems or lab software which are designed to process the patient data and to release the reports to the individual patient. That is called LIS. Then what is LIMS? That is laboratory information management system. These are designed to process and report data related to the batches of samples from drug trials and other entities. So LIMS is basically laboratory information management system, where there is a process of reporting of the data with respect to the drug trials and with respect to the samples which are processed in batches. Use of LIMS enables a laboratory to track specimens from receipt, processing, testing, and reporting to storage. So basically, there is a complete audit trail. If you see, there is a complete trail, there is complete traceability where the samples have received, where it was processed, when it was tested, when it was reported. So your LIS gives have enables all this activity to be tracked at any point of time. It captures patient and research data electronically and integrated patients and specimens information, thus enable determination of patient outcome and support patient management. So it captures the data and it helps to appropriately manage the patient outcome. Since it is captured electronically, so it is a non-exhaustive. You can capture thousands and thousands of attributes with respect to some patients, and you can store it safely, and the chances of manual errors will be reduced. Procedure for adequate data protection and security, including data editing, deleting, should be developed and maintained by the laboratory. So, various procedures related to amendment of the data, protection of the data must be included in laboratories' policies, and appropriate procedures for each of these activities must be prepared and documented by the laboratory. Now, as I mentioned, today's session will be of two parts. One is related to the data management and the second is related to the regulatory requirement for medical laboratories. So what are the various regulatory requirements? So I'm going to give you some list of the registrations, licenses and documentation which are mandatory for medical laboratories to start up their operations and to have appropriate safety protocols for the personnel and the patients which are visiting the laboratory, and also considering the environmental protection. So first important document is basically the legal registration of your laboratory. Your laboratory must be legally registered under appropriate act, under appropriate entity. If it is a private standalone laboratory, it can be limited as a private limited. If only one person is going to start and work in the laboratory, or maybe he can employ two or three more persons or other personnel who are not partners, that means only one person is the owner of the laboratory, then the laboratory must be registered under a one person company act. Now these are new regulations have been introduced by government of India since last almost 1.5 to 2 years. Previously it used to be a single promoter, or you used to carry as a something under proprietorship act, but now if a single person is operating, or if a single person is the owner of the laboratory, then it must be registered under a one person company act. If there are more than one or two or three partners are there, then there should be a limited liability act. Your laboratory must be registered under limited liability act. If it is funded by some partners or some shareholders, then it must be registered under company act as a limited, private limited, public limited, whichever is applicable. Registration or legal registration of a laboratory is mandatory for functioning in your geographical location. Apart from that, there is a gazetted notification for minimum standards for medical diagnostic laboratory, which is the Clinical Establishment Act 2010. There are various amendments in the original act, and there have been various adoptions by different states in India. So some states have adopted it as it is, some states have made their own modifications and adopted it, some states have not yet adopted it. So wherever it is applicable, your laboratory must be registered under Clinical Establishment Act. Apart from that, you should have appropriate biomedical waste generation licenses that will give you a license to generate biomedical waste, because you are going to deal with the human specimens. There will be a lot of wastages which are biohazardous. So you should have appropriate license from for biomedical waste generation. You should have license from Pollution Control Board license with respect to air and water pollution. Your activities is going to create pollution in the environment which will affect water or air. So You need to have a pollution control board license, AERB license registrations. If you are dealing with nuclear waste, or if you are dealing with radiological waste or radiological investigations, or if you have certain assays which uses this nuclear or radioimmune assays, then you need a appropriate AERB registration. PCPNDT registration. Yes, this is required for those laboratories which are involved in prenatal diagnostic testing or pre-conception diagnostic testing. You need to have registrations under PCPNDT Act if you are performing any of these activities. Biomedical Waste Collection Agency MOU. So once you have a license to generate the biomedical waste, how we are going to discard it, how you are going to dispose of it. So there are two options here. Either you should have your own STP plant to discard, or to for discarding this biomedical waste or for treatment of this biomedical waste, or you should have an appropriate memorandum of understanding or MOU for these biomedical waste collection agencies. They will take the waste periodically from your laboratory and then they will treat it at their apex center. So these are certain licenses and registrations which are mandatory. Apart from that, GST registrations, goods and sales tax, service tax registrations is mandatory, which is also called a trade license. You need to have these financial registrations for income tax department. In some areas, in some geographical locations, in some certain corporations, registration under Shop and Establishment Act is mandatory. So you have to register under Shop and Establishment Act also, whichever is relevant or whichever is applicable in your area. Drugs and Cosmetic Act 1940. So if you are dealing with blood banks and blood products, you must have appropriate registrations under Drug and Cosmetic Act 1940. Employee Provident Fund and Employee State Insurance Registration. So this is also important if you are going to employ staff or personnel in your laboratory to protect their rights, to protect their interests. Your institute must be registered under appropriate Employees Provident Fund. Fire safety NOC, very important. We have seen number of fire accidents here and there. So it is very important to have a fire safety NOC. If fire safety NOC is not applicable, there should be a periodic fire audits and fire training should be conducted at your locations. Building and sanitation compliance certificate. So this is a very important document or certification which is applicable for all type of establishment, not only related to the laboratory, but all type of establishment related to the stability of the building or related to the structural stability of the your infrastructure or building where the operations you are going to carry out with respect to the laboratory. Apart from that, ethics committee approval or ethics committee registrations is required if you are going to conduct any type of clinical research. It is not a mandatory requirement, but as I have mentioned, if you are going to conduct any type of clinical research, it is preferable to have a ethics committee, which is a registered ethics committee. So you need to have a registered ethics committee for conducting any type of clinical research. Food and Safety Standard Authority of India, that is FSSAI license, if it is applicable. If a canteen is present in your premises or if you are serving the foods to the patient via your in-house canteen or in-house kitchen, you should have these licenses with respect to Food Safety and Standard Authority of India. Finally, guidelines as per the Integrated Public Health Laboratories 2024 and ICMR GCLP 2021 guidelines. These are certain guidelines. So these are not the licenses, these are not the certificates, these are not the registrations, but these are the standard guidelines which you have to follow for the appropriate management systems or appropriate functioning of your laboratory. Apart from that, no objection certificate from your municipal authorities may be required. No objection certificates or registrations to the Director of Health Services may be required in your location. So basically, these are certain rules and regulations. Our country is a very vast country, so the rules and state is a matter of the health is a matter of the state subject. So different state have different guidelines, different states have their own norms and protocols. So you may require this registration or no NOC certificate from municipal authorities. You may require NOCs or registrations with the Director of Health Services. These are the some certifications and licenses you may require in your locations. Apart from that, various certifications and accreditations may be required for promoting the quality standard. Again, certifications and accreditations are not mandatory in India. It is a voluntary process, and many parts of Western countries, though it is mandatory, as far as most of the developing countries, these registrations and certifications, or sorry, accreditations and certifications is purely voluntary. So you need not have, or you may not have require it, but to promote the quality services, you may opt for these certifications and accreditation services. So with this, finally, we are able to conclude this last session of this program of good clinical laboratory practices as per the ICMR guidelines 2021.